Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and I will call to order the Community Planning Committee meeting of Monday, October 21st. And I'd like to begin by first acknowledging we are in the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, including our near neighbors, the Chiana First Nation, and also the South First Nation. We have a full agenda today, and we're first going to hear from the Metchosin Arts and Culture Association, who run MACCA, and run a big portion of the old school. We'll next have public participation. I do want to let you know that there is 2 meetings tonight, community planning, but also public works. So if you have a matter for public participation in public works, you should hold off until then. So, committee, we do have some new correspondence in pink, which will add to correspondence as the last item. But are there any other items to add to the agenda or modifications?
Move adoption.
Any seconder? Councillor Gray seconding. All in favor? Thank you very much. So with that, I will ask the folks from MACCA to come to the podium, and be great to hear from you.
Okay, I'll kick things off by good evening, Mayor and Council, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Van Duwater, and I'm the president of the Metchosin Arts and Cultural Center Association. We call it MACCA. As a board, we collaborate efficiently to address the daily challenges and maintenance issues that arise within our organization. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce this amazing board. Janet Parker, Hallway Exhibition Director, put your hand up. Betty Hilda, Vice President and Tenant Liaison Director. Charmaine Welch, Director of Multiple Tasks. And Charmaine's on a task right now. Gail Nash, our esteemed Secretary Treasurer. And Lori Stallman, IT Specialist and Problem-Solving Expert. And Nikki Nadeau, who champions local artisans and makers through expertly curated markets. The Metchosin Arts and Cultural Center is having challenges, one of which is our income versus inflation. Yearly government mandated 3% lease increases require us to budget carefully and precisely. Our financial statements have been included in the financial package submitted to the District of Metchosin. Over the last year, MACCA hosted a number of local cultural events. Highlights include the Ford and French Car Show in the sports field at school, our beloved Christmas market, which transformed the entire school with delightful surprises, a summer market, engaging field trips for students from the nearby Montessori school, the July 1st Festivus, a family-friendly celebration. This year's Festivus featured roller skating dance demonstrations and a performance by an equestrian drill team, adding a touch of rural flair to the event. Local talent graced the stage, and market tents filled the grounds, creating a vibrant and festive atmosphere that was enjoyed by all. Thanks to Charmaine's efforts, 2 enormous cakes were donated by local grocery stores. There was more than enough for everyone. And many kids went home with icing in their hair and smiles on their faces. Thanks to Lori Stayman's efforts, the William Head Prison recently built and donated a wonderful free little library. It's situated on the right-hand side of the school, and it attracts lots of people who stop to donate, peruse, and choose books. The Arts and Cultural Center has given that venerable old 1914 building a new life. With ongoing improvements and updates, it has truly become a vibrant arts space while retaining the charm of its original structure. On speaking of vibrant art spaces, we in Metchosin are so fortunate to have this venue. An arts and cultural center is the bedrock identity of any town lucky enough to have one. The benefits that emanate from these centers ripple through the community. And here in Metchosin, among other things, it helps to preserve our unique spirit. We are proud to see this art center gaining recognition throughout the Western communities and attracting visitors from far and wide. Personal example, my 4-year-old granddaughter attends the local Metchosin preschool, which we are fortunate to have housed in the building. She often asks her mother to visit the hallway exhibition and open galleries, taking time to study the artwork and discuss it with her mom. This, to me, captures the essence of what we are doing. A sense of pride, belonging, and engagement with the arts. As the first, I think we're the first tenant in the school complex, MACCA recognizes the value of the planned improvements. The grand entrance for better access to the gym, continued success of the Mile Zero Brewery, and the arrival of the valued Metchosin preschool, and the growth of our commercial tenants. In closing, I'd like to express how pleased we are with this facility and the opportunities it offers, which extend far beyond the typical art center. The center embodies creativity, inclusion, and enrichment. It is a place to showcase, thrive, prosper, inspire, educate, and provide resources of all kinds. Thank you. And now, hear Betty introduce our tenants.
Thank you, Chris.
Betty Hildreth, I'm the Vice President, and this report is about my portfolio as liaison with the tenants. I have a full report. Do you want me to have it passed out to the councillors? Because I'm going to cut some of it out.
Why don't you give it to Jennifer at the end of the meeting? Yeah, and she can pass it on now.
Okay,
Yeah.
will do. So this portfolio focuses on communicating with our tenants and users within the art center. When thinking of, oh hey, I could put my glasses on just a second. When thinking of how important the art center is to our community, keep in mind that each tenant in the facility brings along a circle of family and friends and associates. So in order to put a face to the list of names in my report tonight, I would like to ask any and all representatives who are present here tonight to stand, state your name, and what studio you work from. And keep in mind that each person, of course, represents many others. So let's start. Could everybody here that's going to give their name, could you please stand? And we'll start with Debbie Bernier. Where are you, Debbie? Oh, okay. All right.
Hi, my name is Deborah Bernier, and I work at Shaping Spirit Sculptures Incorporated Studio. I'm very grateful for the space.
I'm Joshua. I run Shiloh Music Studio, and I just love sharing music with the whole community.
My name is Sylvina Samuel, and I've just recently moved into the building, and I'm thrilled, and I teach cello at Bella Cello Studio.
I'm Yvonne. I'm the new office manager of the Seniors Resource Center, and I'm happy to be a part of the community.
I'm Barrett Fullerton, pardon me. I'm also on the board of the Seniors Association, and we're very pleased to be using the old principal's office.
Who's that?
It wasn't that old.
Okay.
I'm Irene Ives, and I'm the secretary of the Metchosin Art Pod, and I represent 13 of us in the Artist Collective that put on 6 juried shows a year and 6 or more workshops and weekly drop-in art sessions and other fabulous events.
Is there anybody else here from the Art Pod, Irene?
No, just me.
Okay, so there's 13 of you.
13 of us.
Okay,
Yeah, and an executive of 4 people.
okay. Who's next?
My name is Greg Dow. I am blessed to have a beautiful studio in the Art Center, which I share with somebody who can't be here today, Diana Farrell. And we paint, and we've just moved into the new space, but we're already developing workshops and things for it.
And they're just laid
Right.
Thank you.
Charlotte?
I'm Charlotte Huber. I run Huber Studio, which I use for my work in Indigenous communications, as well as in the past few months I've opened a free board game cafe that is open for free for anyone to come and play games. We have about 10 people that come regularly from Metchosin and East. So that's every Sunday as well.
And my name is Arnold Lim. I'm a filmmaker, and I work out of Charlotte Studio, and I've had the great pleasure of using it not only as a set for films that I've made in the past, but also as support locations. And working here out of MACCA has been absolutely amazing.
Robert Kuhn. I'm with the West Shore Concert Band.
Robert is a librarian, and I'm, I guess by default, his assistant. And we are very, very lucky that MACCA has given us a back storage space for the band's music library, which takes up quite a bit of space. So thank you, MACCA, on behalf of the band.
Great. So is that everybody? Okay, thank you. Our thanks to each of you for your willingness and tolerance and creativity and community spirit. And of course, your rent money. So as well as managing the actual facility, we frequently have people come our way asking for advice in finding rental space or in planning their own events. So quickly, regarding rental space, MACCA often refers people onto the community hall, the community house, or the district for potential space. And we're always watching for interest in the use of the gym. There will be more discussion around the gym in the coming months, I'm sure. And so regarding advice or assistance with other local initiatives, I recorded more detail listed in our written submission that I'll give to Jennifer, stating that MACCA's efforts to collaborate, encourage, and advocate. And in the interest of time, I won't read all that out. So lastly, MACCA maintains a monthly column in the Muse and also rotates the Art on the Walls display of the original art, as seen here in the municipal offices. And that's it, time's up. We're most appreciated, and our directors will be happy to address any questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Hildreth. Committee, are there any questions of Mr. Vanderwater or Ms. Hildreth or any of the other MACCA exec? I have one myself, but I'll open it up to you folks. Councilor Johnson.
Yes, I'd like to understand more of what the DIY studio is, what its purpose is, and how often it actually gets used for what its purpose is.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, you got somebody's come to the podium if you go. Thank you.
Maybe I should say, you're good.
Stay there.
I can stay here. Okay, the DIY studio is what we now call the event room. And we've tried, over the last few years, we've tried to keep that room available so that it's not being rented out as a private studio space. It's available there for the public to make use of. It's a room upstairs. It's got a little kitchenette off of it. It's in the oldest part of the building. It's there for public use.
What kind of use is it? Is it like just arts and crafts and that sort of thing?
There's, oh boy, do we have time? There's life drawings every Tuesday. There's a class of
we use ArtPod hosts artist drop-ins, and so we have a watercolor group on Mondays. We have a life drawing group that's developing a robust following, and there's a dearth of life drawing with the live new models. So we have artists coming from all over, from Cowichan, all across Greater Victoria, and that's on Tuesdays. On Wednesdays, depending on the weather, we have a rural sketching group, which is to sort of work with the urban sketching movement that's going across the world, and we have that off and on Wednesdays. And then we also host our workshops there, which happen 6 to 8 of them a year. And then some of our special events like our art material swap meet and other things like that. So that's an in-house use.
Right. And then we have other, like there's a West Shore initiative called Reimagine. We let them use that space for free. That's our donation to that effort. Repair Cafe. Then there's some private rental, like the Hicks rent it once a month, the Housing Initiative Collaborative Society. And there's various other, sundry private groups that rent it. Lori, is there anything else? Lori's on.
Yeah, so it might be rented for private, like a birthday parties. It's different community groups use it for events, seminars, workshops, classes, whatever fits for what can fit in that space. Yeah, there's no fitness classes. There have been, yeah. They tend to need a bigger space, and it's also on the second floor, so that limits what the users can use it for.
Oh gosh, that's right. Yeah, I can't forget that. Arnold and Lynn has used it for film production when they bring in crews several times.
Right, Betty? Let's see which school, that would be Royal Bay Secondary School uses that as an area when they do their once a year end of year. They have their midterm art show. The whole place is full of art from the grade 11, 12s, and they use that room to host kind of like sparkly water and hors d'oeuvres, and they have their family and friends in there. So, yeah.
I've previously run an after-school children's art class there as well for a while. Messy fun.
We also have a member, Diane Marie, who's doing some collaboration grants, and one of the things that she's working on is having a space that with equipment so that artists can hang work and photograph it in a larger space. So that's something that's in the works.
Yeah, she's hoping for that.
And this isn't happening this year, but last year, for the year, I rented it for group cello ensemble of up to 15 cellists in there. But
it's a busy room.
I also rented it for some group lecture. We work with Pearson College, and I plan on further rentals if available for other group lecture stuff I'd like to open up to the community.
Okay, so it's a multi-purpose room, not just arts and culture.
It is.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Oh, okay. All right.
Great. Yeah, I think you have a full answer there, Councillor Donaldson. My question, my question is, I heard you and Mr. Vanderwater describe your approach to finances as working on a zero-based budget. Can you walk through what that means? And also, if you could tell us what you keep in reserve.
Gail, can you come to the microphone? Gail's our treasurer. This is okay.
I hadn't come prepared to this. I'm Gail Nash. I live on Glen Forest Way, and I am the secretary-treasurer for this group by default, I guess. How much detail do you want? I didn't bring my numbers with me.
Yeah.
Okay. When we got our agreement with the district to manage that part of the school, it was decided that MACCA should operate on a zero-based budget. So we should be not taking in a lot of surplus. We shouldn't be going into debt. So it's a very difficult job to try and balance that because we can't predict from year to year what's going to blow up in expenses and how our incomes will be with COVID and so on, where we didn't have income for quite a while. I do my best to balance it, and if you've looked at our statements for the last couple of years, you'll see that we're never exactly at zero, of course, but we do try to balance that out from year to year. We had a slight deficit for the end of our 2023-2024 season, and I'm afraid our Mr. Kirk, is it, pointed out an error in our budget for this year, which was a spreadsheet error where a gremlin got into a cell. So what I had predicted as being a shortfall this year is not going to be the case, and it's since been corrected thanks to Mr. Creek,
who continues to prove his worth.
Indeed. I just wish he'd told me a few hours sooner, so I wasn't scrambling at the last minute before I rang out the door. So instead of having a deficit where we thought we were going to have to pull down from our bank account this year to cover a lot of things, we're actually going to be doing okay this year. So to answer at the present, what do we have in reserve in the credit union? It's about $40,000. Now that, of course, changes.
Okay. And I've heard that one of the things you do is you keep about a year's operating funds in a reserve.
That's something we agreed on when MACCA first started out. We wanted to have enough that we could run for a year if everything hit the toilet.
Okay, great.
Anything else?
Thank you very much. Yeah, perfect. Councillor Donaldson.
I have a finance question.
Oh,
sorry. In your notice to reader, it says the makers who participated in the market donated $55 each for the 2-day winter 2023 and $40 for the July 2024. Are those the table rentals?
yes, essentially, yeah.
Okay.
And out of the money we take in for those markets, pretty much that money is expended. It's not something we carry over so it's not intended as an earning mechanism for MACCA. The markets are supposed to pretty much cover their own expenses in whatever they need. So if there's entertainment or decorations or other things they need to stage those markets, if we have to hire some help to do setup or takedown or whatever, it's all supposed to be covered out of what they take in for the table rentals, which are of course extremely low by current standards elsewhere.
So are they the markets that are outside or inside?
The summer ones tend to be outside, like the one that was part of Festivus. The 2-day winter market is held in the gym, and this year we're very lucky we've been granted use of a couple of the adjoining classrooms as well, which will allow to expand. We have a huge number of market people asking to have space, more than we can usually accommodate, so we get a waiting list.
That's your low cost of tables.
Yes.
It's attractive. So out of that, are any of those funds going towards the rental of the gym?
Yes. So that would be one of the expenses of holding the market. The summer ones, like I said, are held outside in the parking lot, so there's no actual cost that way.
Thank you.
Great. Committee, Councillor Rick.
Thanks very much. I appreciate all that MACCA is doing over the school, and it's lovely to see everybody tonight. I wondered just about the grant in aid and what the process was for that the board goes through. The notes say that you spent about $2,100 last year, and then $600 went to Hans Helgeson and a variety of schools, $300 to the Parisian Cafe, leaving another $1,000. I wonder where it got spent and what process you go through.
Sure.
Thank you.
We call it grant and aid, but what it is when we have funds, enough funds available, we give it back to the community. So we gave it to, Janet, help me out, we gave it to Royal Bay. They came in and did an art show, and we gave it to them and they used it for art supplies. We gave some to Dunsmuir.
They used it for their music program.
Right.
And Hans Helgeson for their art program in the school arts.
2 years.
Because they're so underfunded, and a lot of the teachers buy a lot of stuff for the kids.
So so that's a surprise. And then we gave money to Metchosin Community Game this year, and we always give a grant to the Seniors Hair Region Cafe. Okay.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Committee, anything further? Okay. With that, I want to thank everybody with MACCA, Chris, Betty, Dale, Lori, Janet, all of the executive and all of the tenants as well. Thank you very much. And yeah, bravo again, you folks are true community builders and yeah, bring us together. Thank you very much. We're going to move now to public participation. I want to make a few comments before we get to before we open public participation. Now, I sense that many of you are here because of concerns in the Highmount, Saddleback, Stirrup, and Hackamore area in relation to a trail. And I do recognize that there were some general comments made at the council and committee table on July 15th about this area. What I can also tell you is that there is no active planning for a trail in your neighborhood. To be clear, council has not sent a request to staff to do such planning, nor have we asked our Parks and Trails Committee to look at trails in this area. Now that said, we all need to be aware that there are land parcels in this broader area that are designated as parkland. And as such, these trails are owned by the District of Metchosin, and with that, there is a broader public interest in the fate and future of these parcels. Now, what's proposed in this letter, if I can summarize in my understanding of it, is that the lands within these park areas remain in their natural state, and there is a desire from those who signed the letter to not have a trail there. Now, I would say that personally I'm interested in exploring that, but we need to do so recognizing that there's a public interest inherent in these lands. Now, the process to update the Parks and Trails Master Plan will be underway soon, and that'll give many of us an opportunity to talk about what we want to see with our broader park areas, and I would encourage everyone to participate when that comes to pass. But again, I just want to say there is no active planning for trails in this area, in the area of Hackamore, Saddleback, Highmount. And with that, I will now open public participation up. I would ask if you come to speak, please state your name, the street you live on, and you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you very much.
Darren Brown, Graceland Road. So I'm here to raise several significant concerns about transparency and communication and how crucial infrastructure and public engagement are being managed. First, I'd like to address the ongoing lack of communication, particularly around Parks and Trails Committee. We've now gone many months before receiving the Parks and Trails Committee minutes. This leaves the public uninformed about important discussions and decisions that directly impact our parks, trails, and wild spaces. These minutes are a vital tool for keeping the community updated, and their absence erodes the transparency promised during the election. If the Parks Committee Chair himself has asked for better communication from Council, it is clear that this is a systemic issue. Shouldn't this same commitment to transparency and communication be extended to the public? To make matters worse, there are concerns about financial oversight, particularly Duke Road East Trail project. It seems that the project already exceeded its budget for the survey at the very first phase. This is a major red flag. If this budget is being exceeded this early on, what can we expect from the rest of the project? This overspending requires immediate scrutiny and calls into question whether there's adequate financial responsibility in place. Taxpayers deserve to know how their money is being spent, especially when overruns like this occur so early in a project. Moving on to critical infrastructure. The paved sidewalk section on Duke Road East had a significant tree and vegetative debris flow on it after the big storm. This foreshadows a gravel trail debris flow.
The anticipated debris flow will threaten roads and drainage infrastructure. Without proper engineering on that section of the trail, we could see blocked drainage systems and flooding, which would lead to extensive property damage, private property damage, costly repairs, leaving Metchosin taxpayers vulnerable. The existing budget does not include that expenditure. You must pause the project due to the cost overruns and unforeseen engineering challenges. Meanwhile, the situation on Center Mountain is extremely troubling. What looked like a natural glacial till stream was flooding over the road on the weekend. It's actually sharp stone dust and blasting residue. It pooled on Happy Valley Road and washed out the Galloping Goose Trail before spilling into Bilston Creek. Damages our trails, roads, risks our actual infrastructure, our natural waterways and environment. It's critical that action is taken to prevent further damage and ensure all our trails and roads and waterways remain safe and usable for the community. All of these concerns lead to a larger question of priorities. It seems like special interests are being catered to while urgent infrastructure needs are being overlooked. Roads and drainage systems are vital components of our community's day-to-day functioning and safety. Neglecting these elements in favor of divisive trails and other less pressing matters only delays the inevitable, and when infrastructure fails, the costs are much higher, both financially and in terms of public safety. In closing, I urge Council to restore transparency, pause projects until they have addressed budget overruns, and take immediate action on critical infrastructure issues affecting our community.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Anyone else for public participation? I would ask if folks could refrain from applause. Please, that does help when you like somebody or dislike someone, if you could just let the comments stand on its own. Thank you very much. Ms. Hoover.
Good evening. My name is Bonnie Hoover. I live at 1135 Neil Road. As you know, I was a member of the Bufferland Working Group. I'm glad and I'm thankful that this subject is now moving forward. I wish to thank Councillor Schuppen for his thorough discussion paper, including in this agenda package. When I did the research on park zoning, I picked the municipalities at random, and it was at a time when there was talk of doing 2 rezonings. The first to park, to protect the land, and then later to the ultimate zoning. I am pleased, as I requested many times, that this is now suggested we move forward to the ultimate zoning. My points and input are: will Conservation P4 zoning protect the land versus, say, an ecological reserve ER1 or the ecological reserve P4, which is used by the District of Squamish? This is mentioned in section 4.0 of the discussion paper report. To me, conservation opens up possibilities of land partnerships or sales. It's already been made very clear that this land is to remain in Metchosin. We're done doing boundary changes. We need to uphold the referendum of 2017, and we need to protect our Metchosin. Why does this proposed zoning of P4 include parkland status? Example, District of Squamish does not include parkland. However, it does mention trails. When I read park, I think of recreation. I think of trails. I definitely do not want to see this land listed in the Parks and Trails brochure that is available here at the office, the Municipal Hall. People read park, and therefore that means, how soon can I play? Where is this place? People bring the need for parking, for access or accesses, and all the other related things mentioned in the Bufferland Working Group report of October 2023. I definitely do not want to see trails in the South Lobe, and have spoken many times about this. Do we have to have parkland status in the green space buffer? If we have to have parkland included to protect this unique parcel of land, then we really need to clearly stipulate the area of the bufferland where public can go, the uses, the purposes, and the restrictions of use. Please consider this in moving forward. I believe we can include or dismiss whatever is in the best interests of Metchosin residents, and in particular those who are the adjoining property owners. The District of Squamish also mentions in Ecological Reserve P4, a principal use of marine park. That's not applicable to the bufferland. However, we have Metchosin and Bilston creeks to protect, and this includes the respective riparian areas, which Councillor Shukin has mentioned in 3.0. Considerations to think about. Think Aquifer 606 as an example. Zone P3 is mentioned in 3.0 and in depth in 9.0, presumably pointing out that P3 should not be utilized for this land, and that is the reason why a new zoning needs to be used. The same goes for the current CR2 and CR3 zoning, which is no longer applicable.
Ms. Boover, I'm going to give you 30 more seconds. I noticed your timer started late.
It's my last
so,
sentence.
Okay.
I will leave it at that
Okay.
for tonight. This is what I've actually written here. I am waiting for the next steps to occur and be shared. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And I have copies of that for you all. And I have one for the CEO.
And I do want to point out that Bonnie was a part of the Bufferland Working Group from last year. So, yeah. Anyone else for public participation? Okay, and Bev and then Ron. Bev, go ahead, and then Mr. Ron.
I've written you a letter. I just want to say I fully support your notion of P4, an ecological reserve, and I think it could be compatible with the limited use by neighbors who hopefully would be stewards of this land. And I'd like to see limited public access for the first while it's under restoration. But I think there's a great future for it as a nature reserve, as an ecological reserve, and that's the way forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Albert.
Ron Aubrey, 3745 Metchosin Road, Parks and Trails Chairman. I see on your agenda today that you have correspondence from the Hackamore group of people. We had a visit from them in September 30, and they were concerned that we were discussing their area, and it was not even on our agenda. I asked that council refer this to our committee, this particular correspondence. There are some good points that have been made, but we haven't gotten that far. And I explained that to the group. And that when and if that particular area does get considered, that we will be also having a public meeting. And we will encourage them to come and give their points of view. So at this point, I would just ask that this get referred to our committee so that we can at least review it as well, because again, there may be some other points that would come up in the future for us to consider. But we got bypassed, at least at this point, as far as I was concerned, because we never saw this petition or these points of view. So please, if you would do that, and then in the future, if there are some points that you want to pass on to us in regards to what we are doing in our study, please give us that direction so that then we will do the best job we can to provide council with a new plan. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Aubrey. I do also want to recognize that there are several members of the task in the room, so thank you for attending and thank you for your service. Is there, okay.
Sandra Lamb, 860 Hackamore. I'd just like to read the letter for the benefit of the audience and the video. Mayor, Council, virtually all the residents of Highmount, Saddleback, Stirrup, and Hackamore have signed a petition to strongly voice their opposition to the development of the green spaces for trails or any other form of development. It must be emphasized the residents feel strongly, passionately about their position, as evidenced by the number of opposing signatures. The following reasons articulated by the residents are for Council's consideration in reviewing this matter. It is felt trail development will encourage and increase unwanted human traffic amongst private homes and properties where there are no fences providing privacy and safety. Trail development will increase the potential for vandalism and theft on bordering properties. The proposed trails do not follow the mandate of the 2009 Metchosin Community Trail Network Master Plan, Agenda Number 7, which outlined a continuous roadside trail along Glen Forest Way, Sundance Drive, and Pears Road. These proposed trails are not important thoroughfare for human traffic and should be left as a natural area for flora and fauna. The terrain of these green spaces is markedly rugged with steep banks and boulders, trees, and thick brush, thus making them unsuitable for walking and horse trails. The High Mount Green Space is an important waterway, which should not be tampered with through development. The High Mount Green Space encompasses a vast riparian ecosystem with thick mosses, numerous wildflowers, and is a home to numerous forms of wildlife that warrant protection from any form of trail development. The costs associated with developing and maintaining these proposed trails will be a significant tax burden not wanted or warranted. The potential fire risk with the increased presence of human access and traffic to areas with limited to no firefighting capabilities represent a significant potential risk to property and life. There is also the potential liability associated with developing trails to private property that may be subject to human and fire damage. It is wrong to encourage and create access to Metchosin Mountain, which is under private ownership and is not free and open to the public. As evidenced by two previous initiatives, 2005 and again in 2016, it was determined the majority of surveyed residents of the area felt that these green spaces should be kept in their natural undeveloped state. This is the third time this matter has arisen, based on the desires of a few against the strong resistance of many. Petitions were signed by the residents against the proposed trail development and accepted by mayors and council in 2005 and 2016. Both times councils voted to leave the green spaces undeveloped as a natural corridor for flora and fauna. This understanding is in line with Metchosin's policies regarding the importance of natural habitat. In conclusion, I will read from the OCP Environmental Policies, page 1. Environmental management must go beyond establishing park areas. It is necessary to understand how natural systems function. Bylaws and incentives to maintain natural vegetation are important ways of maintaining the natural diversity and contribution as a carbon store, and to encourage conservation of Metchosin's biodiversity and environmental heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lamb. And of course, we will be taking up contents of the letter during correspondence. So thank you very much. Anyone else for public participation?
Hi, Council, Mayor. My name is Beth Medill, and my husband and I have lived at 4060 Saddleback Road since 2005. One note before I talk about why we are here tonight. There have apparently been discussions about our rock retaining wall at the back of our property. We had a land survey done before it was built, and it is entirely on our property. When we bought, friends joked we were moving to the Ozarks. They live in Langford and now envy our green spaces. Metchosin offers a lifestyle that's truly unique. It's green, environmentally aware, and community driven. It's a lifestyle we're fiercely proud of and committed to voting to preserve it. Developing the Saddleback High Mount Pears Loop is considered a waste of Metchosin tax dollars and a big source of frustration among our neighbors. The terrain is just not just rough, it's nearly inaccessible for the majority of potential uses. There is also a seasonal waterway flowing 6 months a year into Bilston Creek, which further complicates any potential development. The area residents do not have any desire or use for development between High Mount, Saddleback, or the Pears Loop? Two questions I keep getting asked. Who is pushing for these developments? And why would the mayor and council potentially spend tax dollars for something that the area residents clearly say we don't need or want? We propose instead making strategic improvements along Glen Forest, Sundance, and Pears as needed. This route would be safer and more accessible for everyone, including cyclists, walkers, joggers, families with strollers, and horses. It aligns with the community's needs and ensures the visibility crucial for emergencies. This proposed connection between High Mount, Saddleback, and Pears Loop serves no real purpose. Both streets are dead ends and there are no significant views or destinations in the area. 95% of the neighbors strongly oppose these trails. We favor and will continue to vote to keep these areas green and untouched. The sentiment is clear and nearly unanimous. It has been through two previously voted down petitions, one in 2005 and one in 2016, and now it has come up again in 2024. We believe in making our roadways welcoming and accessible, but not at the cost of destroying the character and safety of our neighborhood. Thank you for understanding and considering the voices of those who live here. I just want to clarify that in this meeting's agenda tonight, I was the one who submitted pages 107 and 109, and I would just like to have my name added to those two pages, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Badil. One thing just to clarify, there was mention of proposed trails, and I need to go back and say there are no proposed trails at this time. But thank you for your comments and well spoken, so thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Nicole Shukin, Lavon Road resident. I want to speak to the proposed zoning designation, the conservation zoning. I like Bonnie Boover's suggestion of an ecological reserve zoning as well, and I wonder if that might just be semantics, although the P4 question is a really good one. I just want to thank Councillor Shukin, I guess, for beginning to actualize like some of Council's declarations and commitments, especially around the strategic plan, the climate action plan, the biodiversity crisis. Until declarations and commitments are turned into actual concrete steps, it really is just talk. So it's great to see conservation begin to get codified in zoning, and hopefully it will in bylaws as well. So yeah, I hope that the committee will not divert, dither, or delay on this proposed zoning designation, but actually get to work on the immediate candidate, which is the buffer land. But of course, there may be other parcels in Metchosin that are candidates for a conservation or ecological reserve zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shukin. Okay. Any further comments? Okay, we have two people. I'm going to let Mr. Donaldson, I'm going to let you, okay, go ahead and your next map. Okay.
Good evening, Brent Donaldson, 4039 Challister Court, 35-year resident. In the 1980s, we were fortunate enough to live on Challister when Saddleback, High Mount, Ferncliff, Stirrup, Hackamore were all trees. So we've seen a change over the years, and one of the big changes is traffic. And I was the trails coordinator in 2016, and the reason why we explored a connection between Saddleback and High Mount was the concerns from residents about the traffic on Glen Forest Way to connect to the Galloping Goose Trail. So over that period of time, there was the construction of the Ferncliff Trail, which connects the Ferncliff High Mount to the Galloping Goose. Internal trails certainly are not advertised. There's no signage, certainly from the Goose, for the Ferncliff Trail. If anyone in the area is familiar with Glen Forest Way, you'll find out pretty quickly that the roadside does not support any sort of development. The ditches on either side of Glen Forest are way too steep and too deep. So hence the exploration of that particular connector. So at the time, we were met with some pushback from the neighbors. But what I find really interesting is that there's an indication that there's no trust. And anybody using these trails are going to be neighbors. So I certainly look beside you, and if you got a neighbor, do you trust them? Because those are the folks who are going to be using these trails. I had a neighbor that was new to Metchosin. He lives on Glen Forest Way. Around 2016, he thought he'd go up and have a look around. He was told he couldn't enter that area. That's public land. So I think neighbors have to look in the mirror and say, what is the best interest for all of Metchosin? I live on the Galloping Goose Trail, and I certainly hope you don't walk by my yard or any of the other trails. So we have trails in Metchosin. I would warn anybody that maybe has a trail next to them.
So you gotta make sure you're addressing the chair.
Pardon me? Yeah, anybody that has a current trail beside their property in Metchosin that's being heavily used now, come to council, get a petition together, and maybe you can close it down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, Mayor, Council, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. My family has lived within the
Sorry, you have to say your name and
sorry. Okay, my name is Roseanne Matt Monroe, and I live on 3965 Stewart Place. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. My family has lived within the Hackamore subdivision since early 1992. We, like most people living in Metchosin, appreciate and value the many parks in Metchosin as green spaces and places to visit. I would like to talk tonight about the status of proposals to develop the parks within the Hackamore subdivision. As you may already know, the Hackamore subdivision was constructed and completed in the early 1990s. The area's designated parks remained as natural undisturbed green spaces at that time and remain so today. There were not any plans to develop and construct trails in the parks by the developer or the district of Metchosin, and there is no evidence or documentation affirming trail development for then or later. Twice in the past, the Parks and Trails Advisory Select Committee have proposed development within these parks. There was very strong majority opposition to both proposals by residents and surrounding areas, including 2 large private properties located on Metchosin Mountain that have large undeveloped areas that share a border with the majority of the parks. In 2005, Mayor and Council rejected the proposal by the Parks and Trails Committee to construct multi-purpose trails within the parks. This proposal was addressed at council meeting, and it was unanimously voted by Mayor and Council that the status quo with the Hackamore subdivision parks stay as natural parks. Reasons indicated trails should have been built within the parks at the time the subdivision was being built. Very strong majority of residents in the neighborhood and surrounding areas do not want trails constructed in the parks and want parks to remain as natural green space as corridor for flora and fauna. Parks not positioned in areas suited to trail traffic. Parks are located between backyards, mostly sloped rough terrain, some with seasonal water catchment and streams. They would infringe on privacy, encourage potential fire and security risks for parks, residents, and large undeveloped private properties. Parks are not a transportation route and do not lead to any public viewpoint, large park, or recreational destination. In 2016, the Parks and Trails Committee conducted a survey of some of the work of the parks within the Hackamore subdivision for the purpose of developing connector trails. When the proposal was brought forth to Mayor and Council indicated that the proposal was not a council initiative, and it was agreed by Mayor and Council that there were other park developments within Metchosin that were of greater demand and priority. Now in 2024, approximately 30 years after subdivision has been built, the status quo of the parks remains as natural undeveloped parks. The opposition to develop within the parks remains very strong in the Hackamore subdivision and surrounding areas. In addition, there is not sufficient demand to justify disturbing the natural state of these parks. I would like to request that Mayor and Council not agree to any proposal to develop these parks and support the position that the parks remain as green space in their current natural state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Monroe. Okay. I will take a call, final call for public participation. Okay, going once, twice. Thank you very much, everyone, for your comments. And again, we will get to some of these other issues as we go through the agenda. So committee, we're going to move on to item number 4. Thank you. Okay, item number 4, the adoption of the minutes of the community planning meeting for June 10th and the special community planning meeting for September 23rd. We've seen these both before, thus we're adopting them. I wonder if I could just take them together, unless there are objections or questions. Mayor Little?
Yeah, move adoption together.
Seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Great, thank you very much. Okay, next we have receipt of minutes from the Parks and Trails Advisory Select Committee, and there are 4 minutes here. I'm prepared to take them as a bundle, or if there are any questions, we can look at them individually. Okay, hearing none, I will move, if I can have someone to move receipt of the minutes.
I'll move receipt.
Okay, Councillor Rapp, and seconded by Mayor Little.
Could I speak to that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so there was a comment earlier in the evening that the minutes, that we weren't being transparent with not having these minutes. So these are the minutes from June 26th, July 16th, August 7th, and September 7th. These are the Parks and Trails Advisory Select Committee. So both the meetings are open to the public, and they always take minutes, and the minutes are available in a transparent way to the public.
Great, thank you, Mayor Little. The other thing that I will say is the normal course of business is that those minutes will actually be go through this committee. This is the first time this committee has met on a regular footing, if you will, since I think June or July, or sorry, it's been a while. So yeah, great. So with that, Councillor Craig.
Just a point of clarification and perhaps practice. On page 17, there's a note of Councillor Donaldson was in attendance at the Parks and Trails Advisory Select Committee, and of course probably there as a member of the public. So not a critique of Councillor Donaldson being there at all, but it should probably, I would expect that maybe should be put in as a guest or something, so we're aware that another councillor was there. If 3 councillors are there in council chambers, then it creates a problem for us in terms of quorum and that sort of thing. So just to mention it.
I'm actually not
turn that to staff, just ask through the chair if that can be done.
One thing it's a great point. I will check in with our Deputy Corporate Officer about that. I have to say though, I'm not sure that Councillor Donaldson was there. I was reflecting a comment that had been made the night before. And I think, and actually this section of the minutes are actually in my update. So I don't believe she was there.
Oh, excuse me, the way it's written, it suggests he was there. I just want to be clear, not a criticism of any individual, just an idea of clarity for people to know. As regards the minute distribution, Mayor Little is correct. These minutes come to this committee for review before they go out. But maybe we should talk to a corporate officer just about our practices, because that's 3 meetings over the summertime when we don't meet for months on end. And it would be nice probably for the public to see what happened at the meetings. They're draft minutes, no reason they can't be out there for people to see, in my view.
Okay.
Just an action item.
Yeah. Again, I'm happy to talk to our Deputy Corporate Officer if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I do agree. It does look like it was a comment from Councillor Donaldson. So yeah, but Councillor Donaldson.
I just had a question about on page 25. This would be the Parks and Trails meeting for the September 17th. Comment under other business, or the point is 9B, the equestrian mountain walk. This had come up at an equestrian meeting that I had attended. And several different ideas, and I'm not sure if it was transposed to your group or not, because their meeting was quite a lot later. There were some lovely mountain blocks made by the former chair of PCAS that are down on Hillman, and during the discussion at NES, I had suggested maybe that would be an idea, is to replicate those and also consider them as memorial mountain blocks as well as an idea. I did like the other ideas that came up as well, but that was one of the ones that the local Western Club had explored.
Great.
As an option, and I'm not sure if the chair would be interested, but certainly those are quite lovely models for that.
Yeah, okay. What I understand is that the current chair, Mr. Aubrey, who is here, is going to be connecting with staff to see how appropriate these are for the locations selected. There's talk about a rock. The wooden mountain blocks may be a better alternative, but yeah. He is aware of the blocks on Hillman. Yeah, and probably the former chair's involvement there. So.
The CRD Golden Goose corridor, there are several boulders at each section. There's one actually right outside my gate that has a nice step up in boulder. So if we're fortunate enough to find a boulder, that would be also something that the Westerns explore as an acceptable option for sure.
Okay. Not a horse person, I was intrigued as to what a mounting block actually is, and I discovered it's very simple. It just helps you get on your horse. Is that correct?
It does. You should be able to mount from the ground. However, you can torque the body of the horse too. So, but that is a very critical intersection, as we've discussed in previous meetings. Generally walking across the road and then getting on your horse, or you walk fully.
Okay.
But they mostly can get from the ground. It's just easier to walk and safer often with that corner.
Okay, great, thank you. With that, we have a motion to receive all four, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, we're now at reports. So what we have before us on page 27 is a report from the Coastal Douglas-fir Conservation Partnership. Let me get there. Great. Yeah, I'm just going to give a quick bit of background on this. Okay, so the report examines the potential of securing carbon credits from the buffer land and then selling those credits within the carbon offset market. Now, we authorize the Coastal Douglas-fir Conservation Partnership, CDFCP, to undertake an assessment back in January. So they did that for free. And they did that working with, we also had someone from the Sunshine Coast as well, offer 2 parcels where they could basically do this hypothetical testing. And I will mention that the original impetus for this came from some of the discussions that we had at the Bufferland Working Group. So the report looks at a carbon credit program at 2 levels. One is a standalone project involving just the 46-hectare buffer land, and the other is a range of hypothetical projects from 150, 300 to 450 hectares. So as you read the report, the financial viability of the standalone approach is pretty self-explanatory. The assessment states that it would cost the district about $1.6 million for a 20-year period on with a standalone project, and that's because of all the costs of setting up the process and the ongoing verification, all the administrative matters. There is greater potential for revenue if we're to be part of an aggregation of projects with a land base ideal at 450 hectares. In that case, the revenue is the other way. It's about $1.6 million over a 20-year period. That's the cash flow projection stated in the report. One thing I just want to point out is that, so that's with the 450 hectares, of which if we went down that road, the buffer land would be 1/10 of that, and that would of course reflect on our revenue potential. Just if you read the report, you'll see that the carbon credit market is complicated, expensive, and it will likely take time. One key point I have to make, sorry, and I'll stop talking here and turn it over to you folks. Involvement in a carbon credit scheme does not work if we decide to rezone or dedicate this land to park. A core principle of carbon trading is that the land must be subject to other uses that would remove the trees. And in the simplest term, you develop a carbon offset because you decided not to log or develop in areas where you could. It's very simple. So personally, I'm not seeing this as something that's right for the buffer land at this time. But I want to turn it over to you folks for your comments. One thing I would say, if just looking at the action before us, is if we believe there's something we'd like to pursue, we might put forward a motion to get more information from the Coastal Douglas-fir partnership. If we don't think it's right for the buffer land or Metchosin right now, we can just put forward a motion to proceed. So with that, thank you for your patience, and I'll turn it over to the committee. Councilor Perry.
I'll put forward a motion to receive the report with thanks to the Coastal Douglas-fir
Conservation Partnership. Great. So we have a second from Councilor Rapp. Any further comments on this motion? Okay, Mayor.
Yeah, it certainly was an interesting read. I was thinking as I was reading through this, I think this is more applicable to greater swaths of land with a lot of more mature trees than we have on the buffer lands. And certainly when you look at the costs of $100,000 for the first year, $120, $150 the second year, unfortunately we just don't have a bank account or a vault beneath this building with a whole bunch of money that we can use to carry out such an initiative. In saying that, I did appreciate this as a learning opportunity. Lots of great information in here, and I have a greater appreciation for the carbon credit, but I think it is more complex than we can deal with at this table right now. And I wish we had great swaths of land of mature old growth forest that this might be more applicable to.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, I too want to echo the thanks to the Coastal Douglas-fir partnership. They did it was real, I've been intrigued by this question for a few years. It was great to see the level of detail they got into, and they are pursuing opportunities, but they're even up on the north part of the island, I think it's North Cowichan, they have land parcels that are 4,000 hectares that are under consideration. So I think you're right, Mayor Little, it's the bigger land parcels that there's potential here. So yeah. Further questions or comments? Councilor Jones.
I thank you for pursuing this. It's been an interesting exercise. A lot to learn, and it is complex. So I feel like it's a little beyond me, but I'm grateful that we actually have the opportunity for this company to be doing this for us. It's good. It's good for us to have the information for sure, and we'll see where it goes in the future.
Yeah. Great. Okay. With that, I'll call the question on the motion to receive the report. All in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Going to 7B. Okay. Forgive me. I just will do a quick introduction of this. So before you is a proposal for a new zone dedicated to conservation and biodiversity values, and the first focus I've proposed is the buffer land. So I'm asking that the committee recommend that staff take a closer look at the potential of the zoning and also its applicability to the buffer land in terms of some of the goals that we've expressed. And the range of questions I've got, sorry, you'll see in the discussion paper, there's a range of questions, including legal matters. So identified in the paper is the fact that our current zoning of park and open space, so P3, there's nothing related to park except for that single reference to park in allowed uses. The rest of it is dedicated to subdivision, essentially. So, and the actual text of that zone is in the report. again, I know you've read this, but I just will repeat a few things about the concept. So just description, P4 zone is for specific parcels of land dedicated to the protection of a natural environment. P4 zone parcels are places where environmental protection, biodiversity, restoration, and enhancement efforts are prioritized, particularly in terms of riparian areas, forest, and terrestrial features. So this is not to say we're excluding people, because one of the allowed activities is pedestrian access, but it does put a priority and emphasis on restoration activities. Restoration and educational and scientific activities. I've given an example of where a similar zone is being used in Squamish. Ms. Shukin earlier mentioned all of the linkages that this has. So our strategic plan, our 2023-6 or broader strategy, the biodiversity resolution, climate action plan, and going way back, one of the first things we did was the declaration of the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis. So, and of course, I do want to thank the members of the Bufferland Working Group. I think this reflects, not perfectly, the overall spirit of the recommendations that they put forward. So, thank you, committee. Your thoughts and comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor Green.
Yeah, I'm in favor of getting a staff report on the rezoning concept, and thanks for putting the document together, Councillor Shukin. I had a couple of questions, and one would be, might the staff report include an estimate of the legal and other costs associated with the rezoning? I think it would be good to know. We saw at our last budget meeting that we overran our budget for legal costs associated with looking at revising the OCP, so there'll be costs here which we should be aware of before we jump in.
Fair. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I wondered, do we have a plan, looking at the Bufferland Working Group report, they were excited about us getting, how much will we resource this, and what will it require, and was the council interested in spending the money? And so I guess the question I have is, when will we ask staff to draft a management plan as recommended by the working group, and get a cost estimate on ongoing management? Any ideas there?
I don't, but you make a good point that a management plan it will be an important thing to actually actioning the efforts in the zone. So, and I would suggest that maybe be a question we ask staff to talk about. And yeah, the one thing I'll mention is we did allocate $25,000 this year for bufferland planning. So good on us for looking ahead and making sure we have resourcing for that. So, and that was in many ways to develop a plan of some nature. So, great. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Gray. I think they should be included. Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, thank you. Very happy to see it come to this place of considering just the one zone instead of the two. That was something that was discussed at the working group table as your co-chair, and there was lots of reasons to do the two different zones and reasons to not. So it was, it's interesting to read your paper on this. I thank you for that. Certainly a lot of thought has gone into this. And the contributions of every member of the working group has been considered, I believe. The one thing that Ms. Buber had mentioned, and was one thing that sort of stood out for me as well, was the P4 zoning. I'm assuming P just means parcel of land, doesn't mean park. At least that's how I've read it. Could be wrong. And in that case, I query it being called conservation as opposed to ecological reserve. I actually went online to see what the difference really was. In conservation, we use that a lot, whether it's conservation corridor, or conservation group, or just conservational list. But the definition of conservation and ecological are quite a lot different. One of the things, or the one thing that we talked about at the working group was ecological reserve, because one of the aspects of that was that it these were areas that were suitable for scientific research, educational purposes, associated with studies in productivity as things move on, and a variety of other things, represented examples of natural ecosystems, and again, limited access by humans, and we've already been experiencing that in this past year with a local student who is, I believe, a resident, her parents are residents here in Metchosin, but is a student with UVic who has been looking at the bufferlands, doing some walks with us, wrote one paper on it. We met, as you are aware, this last week with her again, as she wants to go to the next level on this. And this to me is very promising, because this was another thing that we talked about in the working group with having, hopefully in perpetuity, but partnerships with the post-secondary institutions to be able to study and watch the progress of what the bufferland has to offer us as an ecological reserve. It's just, I think that the name ecological reserve is more definitive of what perhaps the group was aiming for. Still, there would be access by humans, but just a more protected area. And conservation, that can come with, if we did put a conservation studies in, or that sort of thing. So conservation area, when I looked it up, it was an area of special architectural or historic interest, the character, appearance, setting, which is desirable to preserve and enhance, which does fall into the auspices of the outcomes and whatnot of ecological reserve. So I would like us to consider the name being ecological reserve. That's just my perspective.
Okay, thank you. I as I was listening to Ms. Boover, I was rolling the idea of ecological reserve through my mind, and that is the term that the Bufferland Working Group also used. So I'm not caught up in names at all, but one of the things maybe to add in the request to staff is whether, what is the right term to use. The reason I went with P4 is because there's P1, 2, 3, and just it's public space, green space, and all that. Right. So just, but I'm, yeah, I do like the sound of ecological reserve, and yeah. So.
Yeah. So another example of that is, we are aware of BC Parks, right, and that is under the Ministry of Environment. But there's also BC Parks Foundation, which a lot of people think is BC Parks, and it's not. It's just a charitable organization for that. So it can kind of get mixed up if we're going to engage with conservation groups or wherever, if it's a conservation P4, or is it ecological reserve, which to me stands alone and is more definitive. So it's maybe it is semantics, but not to get too confused.
Yeah, a bit, but I think the words matter. So thanks. I'm going to write that as something to add on here. So Mary Little, I think you have a comment.
Yeah, thank you. In regards to Councillor Gray's question about legal costs, to my knowledge, the greatest cost will be staff time, and a survey will have to be done. You recall when the trees were cut illegally at the Blaney Trail, when we petitioned to have that trail turned into a park. The cost wasn't legal cost, it was we had to have a survey before the province would consider it. We had to have a new survey done, so that would be a cost. And then I would presume once the zone is established, then staff could get to work on some kind of management program regarding that. I too would like it to be called whatever it's going to be, whatever the purpose is, and I think we've heard loud and clearly that some kind of an ecological or conservation area. So I would put my vote behind something that characterizes what its use will be. I also want to be careful on how we rezone this, because we don't want to preclude ourselves from the opportunity for grants. So just let's be careful. We don't want to rezone it to something and then realize that if we have that parcel of land zoned like that, it's not applicable for grants. such as reforestation, biodiversity enhancement grants, or riparian zone restoration or protection type of grants. So we just have to be careful with that, but I'm sure that we've got an excellent planner here, and I'm sure she'll be able to answer those questions or get that information for us.
Thank you, Mayor Little. And the one thing you tweaked with me is the question that was asked earlier is why designate it or zone it as a park? And the simple answer to that is if you designate it as a park, you have that added level of protection in terms of against a sale. So as we saw in October 2021, there was a move to sell the bufferland, and all that essentially in terms of legal stuff needed to be done was an advertisement, and then the district administration and mayor could move ahead with the sale. With a park, you have to get some form of elector approval. That often takes the place of a counter petition, so you need to sign, get 10% of the voters. If you get 10% of the voters opposing, you then need a referendum to dispose, to sell that parkland. So that's why park gives you that added layer of protection. So, yeah.
And a second question, is there an added layer of protection with an ecological reserve?
I think you could still, in the definition, again, this needs to be confirmed by the planner, is say that this will be known as a park based on, I don't know, whatever acts are applicable. So,
and just that's what the Parks and Trails Committee has always maintained in terms of the bufferlands. We zone it to park, so it gives it that added protection. So kudos for them for recognizing that 2 years ago.
Okay, great. Councillor Gray.
We can leave it to staff. I think on pages here. There's a reference to the provincial act. I think ecological reserve is a defined term of the provincial legislation, and it refers to crown land. It wouldn't be applicable here, but our plan can take a look at that.
Yeah. That was one of my misgivings, but I feel like we can still do it because Squamish did it. What did they say here? They've got ecological reserves, so Squamish did it. We could. Sure. Okay. Councillor Donaldson, back to you, Councillor. Oh, hold on, Councillor Beck, go ahead. So.
I'm not opposed to creating a new zone, but I really think it's important to look beyond the buffer. Our other parks aren't protected. If the staff is going to put all the work into creating a new zone, the bufferland is one area, but we have Section 95. It's also very close to that same area, which we'll be getting when the Timucua Treaty is signed. And there's our other Metchosin Park areas that really aren't, they are designated parks, but as we can see by our park and open space zone, it's not very, well, it really doesn't say much at all about what to do with the park. Certainly the ideal is to have a park management plan that looks at all our parks and how we're going to protect them. My concern with the buffer land is regardless of what zone is called or whether it's conservation or ecological or anything else, I still really have a hard time imagining that we're going to be able to keep the people from the housing development next door out. And I still don't know how that's going to work regardless of what we call it. So maybe that somehow that can be, police will come up with the $25,000 study. I'm not sure, but I just I think it's a great idea to be able to have that zone on various areas in Metchosin. But we also need to look at our other parks, and if we're going to be changing things like that, such a major change, that we could include other designations, other zones as well.
I'm sensing consensus on moving the recommendations forward. So I wonder, Councillor, if we could add, something to the order of assess applicability. to other parks, or what zones may be applicable for the protection of other parks in Metchosin? Something, so we look broader. We ask the planner to look broader. Something.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Councillor Donaldson, and then Councillor Grant.
So two things I want to say. One is Strathcona Park on the island here also has an ecological reserve, and limited public can access it. Another, I'm not sure if it's a reserve, I think it is, I'm not certain. Riffit's Bog is a place that I have visited recently with my partner, and it is next to a large, I wouldn't say as condensed housing development, but a large housing development. And it was not trampled down near as much as what I've seen some of our nature parks, but it was well groomed and it was well preserved as a sanctuary. So it was really, I sort of went through there with the idea of like, is this what the buffer lands could look like or not? So that was just one thing I wanted to say. We already have an ecological reserve for sure on the island. Also, as we're going through the active transportation plan and the Trails Master Plan on the heels of that, to what Councillor Epp is saying, in regards to the future of our other parks, maybe over time we can sequentially introduce something that is of higher protection or not, or an element of ecologically sensitive, not zone, but purpose.
Yeah.
For all of these green spaces that we do have, just in preserving them.
Great. The one thing I just will mention is that there. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Grant.
Sure. Again, thinking about costs and taxes again. I'm just wondering, if we make this change, which sounds like a good idea, along with the change in the description comes responsibilities. And I'm thinking of page 24 of the agenda package where the PTASC minutes should say that we're having trouble recruiting volunteers to help with existing parks and trails. And then when I read this description here, this place is going to need maintenance and clearing out of restoration. I think we talked about was a list of activities. And those activities, we'll be responsible for those activities. And if we don't have volunteers and it's staff working on it, I'm just putting it out there that it's a question. I think if we're going to move forward with this, we do need to think about, well, how will we actually do it? We can change the name, but how do we actually implement it? And so I'm raising that, maybe that could be part of a staff report as well, just sort of laying out, well, these are the kinds of things we're imagining. Still on the theme of money, the district keeps a record of book values, right, of all the properties that we own. And I wonder if we could ask the staff to recommend on the advisability of having an appraisal of fair market value done before we do the rezoning, and will the book value change? I think we've talked about it a bunch. I don't know if it's applicable at this point, but I'd like to hear from staff whether or not it's a good idea. Essentially lets us know the value that we have at the moment, and what if we rezone it, we may value drop, and just so we understand what we're doing with the resources in the community. Page 70.
Just for clarity, I think you're asking about the potential of an appraisal.
Yeah.
Do
is best practice to get an appraisal before we zone it, yes or no? And I think that would be just great to know. On page 74 in the agenda package, you reference the previous council's attempt to sell it to the CRD. As you know, that attempt unraveled. Having agreed to that sale, I wonder if anybody might comment, there was no appraisal done then, and that was kind of a sore point, I think, for the community. Yeah. And if we get that answered, that would be great. The other two things I wanted to ask about or raise were, it seems to me there's really two things going on here when I look at the note. Well, three things. One is creating this great zone, new idea. But the other is we're saying we don't want housing in there. So we're taking a stand here. We're saying, look, that houses could go in there at the moment, So we're saying we don't want houses in this area. And yet, around the table here, I've heard people talk about how we want to do our part, get more housing in Metchosin. So I would like to see people committing to the idea of what we're doing. If we're not putting housing in the buffer land, we're not interested, or we're not signaling that we're putting housing somewhere else in Metchosin or increasing the density, contrary to the OCP, contrary to our council policies. Councillor Chu, can you talk about doing our part in housing? Mayor Little, you talk about doing our part in housing.
I don't know if I've used those phrases.
Doing our part, I think, is...
Yeah, no, I think we will be looked at and asked if we're doing our part. I don't think I've volunteered us. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, great. I just make the point. Let's if we're proceeding down this to limit housing, then it seems to me we could be consistent. The other question I have.
Sorry.
Sure.
I don't follow your logic on this, and I don't think the buffer land was ever intended to be for housing. And I go back. Sorry, if I could, I will get back to you to your comments in a second. The key two things I just want to mention is we own the buffer land now. It is a baby that we have to care for and nurture, and if we don't, somebody is going to decide what uses apply there, and we run. The one thing we did as a buffer land working group is we looked at the do nothing option, and we came to some really grim outcomes if we do nothing around that. But the other thing that I feel like and feel free to disagree, is the 2017 referendum that will enable us to secure 3 big parcels of land and the buffer land has meant basically the development of Centre Mountain, but especially on the local side, it has meant impacts to the neighbors in the Centre Mountain area, the Neil Road area. And I believe we have an obligation to those neighbors to minimize future impact as much as we can, because we will get the gift of lands that will not be developed, and they might have been developed had things gone the other way. So I think that's one of the inherent things. And again, I don't believe there was ever sort of planning for housing in the buffer land, but depending on how the government is formed, we are going to be probably asked how we are trying to action housing. So anyways.
Thanks for your response. The notes say it's currently zoned for housing. I think we're trying to stop that. Sure. That's one of the actions we're trying to bring into play. But I'm asking that if we consciously do that we look elsewhere and don't move against our current plan and council policies increase density elsewhere beyond what we already are able to do, which is quite a bit. But you're making you brought me to the other point I wanted to make, which was that I think we've talked about it, and Councillor Epps raised the issue. How do we keep people out? That people will want to go in there. We're going to have a big housing development next door, and part of our regional role is as the green space around the CRD. We want to be welcoming people to come to Metchosin as some of the natural places that we have, and so this is a bit counter to that. So I just want to say I don't know if for the record exactly, but the idea of having a single trail going from the bottom to the top seems to make sense to me in terms of getting some pedestrian use of the place, being welcoming to people to use the trail. I'm not talking about anything more than that pedestrian access, but I think it needs to be on our radar if we want to be part of the region and play our role. So it's relevant to us not to just be all about closing it off and nobody going in there, I think.
Totally. And thank you for that comment. Just a quick one. Again, the plan is not to be exclusionary. It is to manage the uses, it's to limit the uses, and the park plan will help us with that. It's to manage the access points as well. And I agree with you. We should not be seen as being exclusive. That is, I think, contrary to the way I don't know, people view Metchosin, and I think we'll get ourselves in trouble, and I think ethically it is wrong too. But to manage access and to limit uses, I think is fair enough if the motives are good ones in terms of environmental protection, biodiversity, etc. So thank you very much, Mary.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I've never said that there should be housing on the buffer land. The housing component, I think, is a relic from the zoning for a golf course. It's a golf course and condominiums, I imagine. There hasn't been any talk at this table of putting housing on the buffer lands, and I think we should be very consistent with the original green space buffer and the promise to the people that live there, the promise in the 2017 land swap referendum. What we have learned from the developers is that when I queried, we don't have the capacity to keep people out. So will that become a park for the Langford residents that have bought into the Central Mountain development? And they've said no, because there's going to be fences and walls all along it. And if you go up there and look at the topography, you can see that there definitely will need to be walls, retaining walls. And they just can't have retaining walls and a drop off, they've got to have fences as well. And so, but that doesn't mean at the entrance there will be fences, but that may be something that we can do. Anyways, I just thought I would clarify what I know so far in terms of we don't have to fence the whole thing. There is going to be, when I'm told, fences all along and retaining walls in some areas along the border.
Great, yeah, and I've heard pretty much the same thing. I am struck though that sometimes plans change, as we saw with the stormwater detention. So, but I think that, it's a big bet. We're going to see that. So, that's great.
Any news on the stormwater detention pond?
Not that I'm aware of. So, yeah. Okay, so Council, thank you very much for the discussion. If I could, let me just sum up where we're at in terms of the request, and maybe someone could echo this in a motion, if that's possible. So the request is we're recommending to Council that staff create a report on the potential of the new zone, including a review of the general terms proposed, an assessment of how the new zone would support our biodiversity and conservation objectives, legal process and considerations related to parkland, the land use bylaw, and the official community plan, alternative approaches which are consistent with community input and management considerations around the bufferland. Now, so new input, an estimate of legal and rezoning an estimate of costs related to legal and rezoning matters, as well as any other costs such as surveying. Related to a management plan, what that might look like and when it is appropriate to develop. And then to Councillor Epps' comments, a review of zoning that may support the protection of other parks in Metchosin. Councillor Epps? Sound okay? Okay. And then finally, what is the appropriate name for this new zone? Should we agree to move ahead on that? So, okay. Can I have
the appropriateness of advisability, not appraisal.
Okay. And also, exactly. The advisability name and appraisal. So, okay. So with that, can I have a motion in support of that? Long statement. Okay, Councillor Donaldson, thank you. Seconded by Mayor Little. Okay, discussion on that.
I'm just wondering about the suggestion of getting an appraisal, because we're not interested in selling it. An appraisal could cost a lot of money, and I'm just wondering the value that it will, if it is so that we, by rezoning it to a P4 or conservation, that we devalue it in terms of saleability. Well, we're not interested in selling it anyways. Does it really matter? And would that stop us? If the price was a drop of $2 million, would that stop us from doing anything? I suspect not.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure whether, given our finances, that an appraiser is warranted at this time. But you could ask the planner if that is needed.
Yeah, and that's what I take from Councillor Gray's inclusion, is we just ask where it fits, how appropriate it is, and if there's value in it. So I think that's fair enough. But Councillor Donaldson, so.
Yeah, I think it is valuable to certainly ask her to give us some feedback on that. Also, and if it is a zone that does allow for future councils or administration to sell, then could we protect that now with a restrictive covenant? I don't know, but if she can guide us in that regard when she reports that.
Yeah. So one of the things I asked is alternative approaches. Yeah. So maybe we can mention restrictive covenant as well, 219 covenant. So. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Great. Thank you very much. Okay. So thank you. We're now going to move. Okay. Everyone's favorite councilor's update. I'll try and go through this quickly. So as was mentioned earlier, sorry, no, not mentioned earlier. I want to just say that the legal and topographical survey of Duke Road East commenced, I think it was last week, something like that. This is being done by a survey company called McKelvey Riley. They gave us a pretty great price to do both. This is well under the other companies that provided their estimates. Now, it's $11,000, not $10,000. When I came to the budget committee, I asked if we could support $20,000, which was taken from reserves and for the survey, and if there's money left over for the work that has been done. And so we're not over budget by any means. And that work is underway. I'll keep you posted. So I'm going to jump down to the third item because this next one might have a little bit of. I just want to mention that our Trails Coordinator, Ryan Carter. Good news for Ryan, he has bought a new home in a neighboring municipality, so he's going to be leaving us. Ryan was a great addition to PTAS, and we've had a lot of wonderful Trails coordinators. One of them is in the room right now. So Ryan was definitely in that category. He's spent a short time with us. He's mobilized people. He's been a great asset in terms of understanding and trying to help us fathom parks and trails related issues. So he is going to be missed. One thing I do have to mention is I'm not convinced that we're eminently short of volunteers. We did get a list of 11 people at the Metchosin Day who were interested in being park stewards. And when we did the recruitment for the new positions on Parks and Trails, we had quite a number of people. I won't say the exact number, but so there is interest in serving. So yeah. So again, big thanks to Ryan. He will be missed. And okay, so one bit of activity for us committee is we have before us on page, where is it now? Thank you for your patience. This is a long meeting, and I appreciate your time in all of this. Hold on one second. Okay, the Parks donation process. Page 79, you'll see a new draft of the Parks donation guidelines. The big changes around this, so this has come from PTAS to the committee, and maybe we can advance it to council if we or staff. So what's new is further background on the program. You'll see that we actually have 15 memorial benches now, and you'll see the inventory where they actually are. More suggestions on what can be donated, and then clarification on the renewal process. That was a little vague in the previous guidelines, although I do note the 2008 policy does have renewal information, and it also has a few interesting things that maybe we need to be attentive to. So I brought this to you for your input. If you think there's more work to be done, we can move it to staff for a closer look, or we can move it to council for full full approval, so comments.
I just have one question. It answered actually quite a few of my questions since this came up earlier, a couple months ago. So at the renewal time, which is at the 10-year mark, if the family doesn't want to renew, their plaque does get to stay on the bench. Is that correct?
No, it wouldn't.
So it goes back to the family?
Yeah, they would have to commit to renewing, and they would have to pay a maintenance fee, which we've estimated at 20% of the replacement cost. So that would be a one-time payment, and yeah.
Okay, so the second part of that question is if they choose to renew, can other families put a plaque on that same bench?
We didn't cover that. I would say it is definitely up to the originating family.
Okay.
So they would have bought the bench, paid for the plaque, paid the maintenance fee, and if they renew, that's part of the deal because they bought the bench. So yeah,
right.
That's maybe something to also address here. Yeah. If there's changes or anything.
That's what I was wondering. So if they choose not to renew, then all the money they put into the bench no longer.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they buy the bench, it's theirs in terms of the memorial plaque for 10 years. And then after that, yeah, it would turn over to the district. So.
And is that because of the maintenance of it as well? And you want them to renew to help pay the maintenance?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Marilyn.
Yeah, thank you. The policy document seems to be sound, and the other document, the District Metchosin document, also has some information in it that document doesn't have. So it would be good to recommend that the documents be harmonized. So for instance, I haven't got it written down here, but I can go back in my notes. There's some things in the policy that is not in the guidelines.
Totally, you're right. And so for example, the district reserves the right to the type and style of items such as the park benches and picnic tables.
And the wording as well.
Exactly.
Which I think is a good thing for staff to look at, because you want the public to not be upset by the wording. Right?
Yes. No, thank you. The 2008 documents is actually, as you say, it seems to be pretty sound. I think there's, looking at them earlier today, I think there's an opportunity to harmonize them, and or at least pull from the policy. I did talk to our deputy corporate officer, and she wondered whether this might be a policy that, and just subject to revision.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mary Little, would you like to make a motion that the new guidelines are referred to staff for possible harmonization with the 2008 policy?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay, great. Any discussion on that? Councillor Baird?
I just had a question. It's an additional point, and that is that I'm noticing that, well, it looks like you can have, the number of locations is limited, the number of spots is limited, and there's no limit on the number of monuments per person. So at the moment, when I look at the inventory, we see that there's somebody there, and then we've got with a monument, and now I think coming forward to us as a recommendation, or perhaps we've already agreed to a new monument for the same person. So I just wonder about that role, or same spelling of name.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm imagining, I'm kind of asking the question, given there's a limited number of places, a limited number of spots, would we not limit it, to one person, one monument per individual?
Why don't I add that as a note? I'm bound to connect with staff on this, and yeah. Great, thank you. Councillor.
I just had a comment on the inventory, in that Sonia Young's name is spelled wrong. It's got a J and not a Y.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Marilyn?
Parks and Trails last term did talk about other monuments in terms of the mounting blocks is one. That would be a great one for an equestrian. Those blocks are beautiful. They were constructed by Mark Atherton. And as well as donations for trees with plaques beside the trees in memorandum of a certain person, donation of this certain tree, and that may be something going forward we could use in the buffer land for our reforestation and conservation efforts. So there is limited space for benches, but I don't think there's limited space for other kind of monuments.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let me make a note of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, okay. Okay, great point. Okay, seeing no other comments, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, committee, thank you for your patience. We are moving on. Okay, so we're now at correspondence. So you'll see the year-end report from the Metchosin Arts and Cultural Association. Any comments on that at all? Councillor Brick?
I had a question for staff, and it needn't be answered this evening, but just to get some clarity, I was talking to our CEO the other day. I heard that, and perhaps I misheard, that we rent the space to MACCA for $1 a year. But then when I look in the budget, I see that MACCA pays $7,618 per year. And so I'm curious, and I don't see it in the revenue expense sheets provided in the agenda package. So I just wondered, when the issue comes up about the school, perhaps we could ask Mr. Creek to clarify just what the payments are from the renters at the school and or the people with leases of occupation. Also, a bit more information at that time about the common cost calculations. I just think it would be good to clarify for everybody, what is it that the MACCA is responsible for in terms of repairs and maintenance, and what's the district responsible for in terms of repair and maintenance? It's not clear to me through these documents who's paying for what, and and I'm noticing MACCA is paying for quite a bit. So, are they paying for more than makes sense? So a little bit of clarity when we get to the finance would be a big help.
Okay.
And I appreciate all of the work that MACCA does and frankly, providing us with these notes and everything. So no critique there, just a clarity.
Yeah. Okay. If there are no other questions, maybe I could ask for a motion to receive MACCA's year-end report. So moved by Councillor, Little, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, so next we have the letter and the petition that we received from residents in Saddleback, Highmount, Stirrup, and Hackamore areas, and we also have some other correspondence as well. So I made some initial comments. Just again, summary points that I see in the letter. Residents are concerned about the potential for more human traffic, and there's a worry about theft, vandalism, and the risk of fires. The areas in question are stated to be rugged and may likely unsuitable for walking or horses. There are important environmental values, waterways, flora, fauna considerations. And there's reference, of course, to the earlier efforts to look at the trails in 2005 and 2016. And again, I just want to repeat, really quickly, the final sentence of the letter that Ms. Lamb read. And both times in 2005, so both times, 2005, 2016, Council voted to leave the green spaces undeveloped as a natural corridor for flora and fauna. This understanding is in line with Metchosin's policies regarding the importance of natural habitat. So that's a big theme of the evening. With that, committee, I'm going to turn it over for comment, and Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. I'm happy to speak to it if someone will second it. To recommend to council that the district not develop trails and park space in Highmount, Saddleback, Stirrup, and Hackamore neighborhood.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder? And I'll ask for this 3 times. So do we have a seconder? Okay. Do we have a seconder? Do we have a seconder? So that motion does not go anywhere. I would like to hear some further comments. I mean, maybe we can come back to deeper discussion about what to do and how to do it, but Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, I appreciate the correspondence that we've gotten from the neighbors in this particular area, and have personally attended the town hall meeting of 2016, I guess was the last time, where we had a significant number of people here. So I empathize with their concerns, and with that, I would like us to consider as a council and possibly with our governance arm of PTAS to perhaps do a site visit to see what this actually looks like. I know that some of the areas are steep and whatnot. This particular corridor, I've never been led to believe is, but seeing is believing, as we do with some of our site visits, and I think that it would be worthwhile. I do know back at the last time that this came up, the district actually commissioned a survey that cost the taxpayers $3,000. And we have to ask ourselves, why would we survey something that we already know, or did it reveal something or whatever? So I'd like to also see that survey, or the survey pits, so we can actually navigate through there or whatever, if we should think through. But there must have been a reason for that to be requested. That back then, that would be a lot of fun. You talk about how much money is being spent on the DRE survey, and this is significant, and it's much smaller area. But it would be worthwhile seeing what it is that is a concern in the neighborhood.
And as the chair of PTAS, I do think it would be wise for us to refer it back to PTAS as well for input. So perhaps that goes hand in hand with the site visit. Yeah.
I don't know which would be first.
Yeah. Just, Councillor, did you want to?
I was just going to make a motion that we refer this to PTAS.
Okay. I personally am not convinced that the time is right to move it to PTAS right now, because again, it's a political issue, because there's neighbor concern and it's unresolved, and we haven't given PTAS marching orders to do one thing or the other. I mean, if
Just a point of order. Do you want to get a second for the motion before discussing?
Sure, sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion on the table, and the motion is that we refer this question back to PTASC. So, Mayor Little, could you second? Okay, and discussion. I'll go again, sorry if I can reiterate my points. This is bound, without us making a clear statement that there's not going to be any trails here, this is bound to continue to be a contentious issue. And I think there's room, personally, we've talked about exploring, a zoning designation for the buffer land where we're doing essentially what the residents have asked us to do, is to prioritize flora and fauna and conservation. So I believe until we've kind of considered ourselves what we want to do, I think it's premature to send to PTAS. The one thing I do agree with Councillor Donaldson, it would be interesting to go and have a look and bring PTAS along with us, but keep it at the table. So that's my only comment, but Councillor Donaldson.
With that, I think you're right. Maybe referring it to PTAS as an action is premature, considering we are looking at or waiting for the active transportation plan, which did do a survey. It was a two-part survey, actually. One where you filled in, answered multiple choice questions. The other was a map where you could actually go in and make comments, which is where I learned more about what was happening in that neighborhood. It was very hard to navigate that part of the survey, but I did partake in it. I think that, so waiting for the results of what the consultant has to say on that as well. On the heels of that, I do believe PTASC is, will be mandated or is mandated to upgrade their parks master plan.
Totally, yeah.
Right. So it seems that's all one bigger step still, that we're sort of waiting for that information. So right now it's the gathering information, which is why I was trying to suggest maybe a site visit to see what it is that they're actually dealing with.
Great. Okay. So we have a motion with a seconder on the table. Comments? Councillor Craig. Start with Councillor Craig first.
Yeah, I mean, if colleagues want to send it to PTASC and that's how the vote goes, that's what'll happen. But I'm not in favor of that. I think it's just causing more turmoil. I think we've got wide and strong community opposition to this trail, and the idea of forcing it through some, I don't know, magic at PTASC or something. If we get to PTASC, it's just forcing all those people that come to another meeting to do the same thing they did in 25 and 2016. And I think that we should be action-oriented and deal with issues. I don't know what information, I mean, I remember our orientation. Don't refer something to somebody unless you have a reason to do so, and you're going to get some information back that's different than what you have today. We've listened to the people on Neil Road, and we're limiting the situation there. This is a group of people who look almost unanimous in their neighborhood to say we don't really want these trails in our neighborhood. I don't see a reason to proceed. So I don't support sending it to PTASC.
Great. Marilyn?
Yeah, I seconded the motion, but I do have reservation. The reason why I was going to why I seconded was because the chair of the Parks and Trails said, please let us see this. Mind you, this is a public document tonight, so they can refer back to it. I'd like to know the person that started this rumor that there was a proposal at this table for trails in that area. We have not discussed that at this table, at the community planning, nor at the council table. So there is a risk if we do send it, as Councillor Gray says, send it to Parks and Trails, that they will act on it. And I don't think it's the right time to do that. Although, playing that devil's advocate, when the development was created, there was park space there was green space for park. And in other parks, and parks where I live in the uplands, there's lots of trails behind our properties, and they're not fenced. And there's not an increase in crime or people lighting fires. It's neighbors using those trails. So I'm not opposed to those kinds of trails at all. But we have heard from some of the citizens that they don't want the trails. And we don't have an unlimited budget, so we do have to prioritize this, and this hasn't been earmarked as one of our priorities. So I would, with that, vote in opposition of the motion.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. Councillor?
Well, I never said that I was referring it to Parks and Trails to put in a trail there. It was mostly just that it keeps in their books as the space that is there, because it is designated parkland. And there are lots of trails in Metchosin that go by people's properties, and we don't really hear, I certainly never hear of problems. And so we used to have one that went right by our house, and we never had a problem because just as neighbors using it. But at any rate, I mean, there hasn't been any plan. As the chair of Parks and Trails said, they have not had any plan to put trails in there. Council certainly hasn't. And so there's no reason to go ahead with that. But it is important that, that, as you mentioned, in your report, it's that, it is public property. And I think those people that moved in there, knew that the park land was going to be there. So I just think that it needs to just, stay on the books basically, but it doesn't have to be developed.
Okay. Just make one quick comment. Sorry, go ahead, Marilyn.
Yeah, I guess I would vote in favor of the motion with what the original intent from Councillor F was for their information, not for action.
Yeah.
And so do you see that as risky?
Personally, I do. I think that if the issue is referred in even almost any form, unless it's really, really clear, it falls in PTASK's lap, and they're dealing with a political issue, which is kind of hard. And they've actually, unfortunately, had to deal with quite a bit of that this year with the Duke Road East Trail. I just don't think it's the right time to bring it to them. And I go back, I really like the idea of doing a site visit, ideally with PTASK, to see what's there. And maybe we'll be able to speak. I have one more comment or two after, once we settle this, but Councillor Gray and then Councillor Dodson.
Sure. It is in the current master plan on page 23, reclamation of overgrown connector trails in Saddleback Road area. It came up, as I recall, in the discussion of a variance, and there were words spoken about the possibility of trails in that area, and the residents need to be aware of that just a few weeks ago. So I think that's where this has all come from.
Mm-hmm.
And then residents attended, as we see in the minutes, the PTASK meeting to say, hey, what's going on? Weren't satisfied there. Drew up a petition, arrived tonight. And I just don't see that. I mean, I'm interested in the discussion about when you're talking about the possibility of a trail, you're talking about pushing it into that neighborhood who don't want it. That's an interesting perspective for the council to hold.
Yeah, great. Councillor Johnson.
Also, I would like to know from staff if we've had any reports of fires, campfires, buildings, any other structures that we've read in some of the literature or correspondence that were given by the neighbors. Has our staff received any information on that, including the fire department? Have they had any calls of concern about fires in that area? In my particular position, I've not heard of anything, but that doesn't mean it hasn't been. There's no reason for it to trickle down here, but I'd like to know from staff if there's been any call-outs for that.
Okay. Yeah, and talking with some of the neighbors, I have heard comments about those, but I don't know. That's a good question to ask if there have been official reports filed. So, yeah. Okay. I'm going to call the question, and the question before us is referring the matter to PTASK. So, all in favor? And opposed? Okay, that motion is defeated. If I could, I would like to make a motion, and I'll be able to talk to this as well, that we ask staff to arrange a site visit for both this committee and PTASK of these areas. And seconded by Councillor Donaldson. And I'll just speak to this really quickly. The residents who are still here, I just want to make it really clear that you have friends in terms of wanting to protect space that is just there for flora and fauna. So the request to do a site tour is not about pushing trails through. And again, I go back to this, there is no proposal to do trails. But I think because we've heard so much about this area in this short time, and there's a history from 05 to 16, and we're also doing our Parks and Trails Master Plan in the coming year, I think it behooves us to go and see the place as well. So, or get some level of familiarity with it. So I would make those comments in support of the motion. So, further comments? Councillor Gray?
I'll just say I went and took a look on the weekend before today's meeting, and I agree with the neighbors.
Okay, great, thank you.
Did you have a seconder?
Yeah, Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah. I'm curious now, actually. I haven't been on the properties, any of those properties, and I'm curious now about the topography and its potential, but I think it'd be great. It's hard to speak to something when you haven't seen it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Great.
So just to clarify, the purpose of the site visit is to determine whether to put a trail in or whether not to put a trail in. What's the purpose of the visit?
The purpose of the site would be to gain familiarity with the areas, of which there seems to be a lot of concern and interest over. I have not been on this land at all. We've heard that, the topography is steep and inaccessible. I think it behooves us to, have a look at that. And again, we have to go back to understanding that there is a public interest in these lands. These are designated park lands. I think I think it would be good for us to gain some familiarity for it. So, hearing no comments, I will call the question. All in favor? Great. And opposed? Councillor Gray opposes. Thank you very much. Okay, we are nearing the end of the agenda. Or have we near the end of the agenda? We have correspondence from Ms. Bacon and from other landowners in the Saddleback, Hondo, and Hackamore stirrup area. And thank you very much for the letters and the thoughts and all this. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Mayor Little and Councillor Donaldson, all in favor? Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.